With its vast territory, variety of landscapes, 2 seas, mountains, and a plethora of historical places, Ukraine could be a true tourist destination. But tourism still makes up only a small fraction of Ukraine's GDP. So what should be done in order to change the situation for the better? To help answer this question, joining us in the studio is Volodymyr Ilchenko, editor-in-chief of the Ukrainian travel magazine Mandry, and an experienced traveler himself. Hello, thanks for joining us today, Volodymyr.
Hello.
So I want to first ask you about what can be better done to make Ukraine more attractive for tourism.
First of all, we should talk much more about Ukraine in the world. And to promote Ukraine abroad, because as far as I know, a lot of people know about Ukraine as the place where Chernobyl catastrophe had occurred. Knows some names, famous names like Klitschko, Shevchenko, and a lot of places are not familiar in the world. We should talk about our attractive places, to make films, to spread the information in internet, etc. For example, people know that about the Chernobyl catastrophe, but they didn't know that this is an attractive highlight in Ukraine.
So maybe selling it not from the place of go see where this reactor is, but the beauty of the landscape now and how it's changed, become this. Is this what you're thinking about, changing how Chernobyl is?
Yes, of course, it has changed. It's quite safe now. When you come to Chernobyl zone, you get not more radiation than you travel, fly in a plane. Just it may be equal one day staying in Chernobyl zone to 1.5 hour
flight in
a plane. So it's quite safe, and it looks like a big national park now.
Yes,
like a reserve. There's
so
a lot of
a great selling point.
Yes, wolves, elks, deer, even bears.
So this could maybe be something for the government to change how Chernobyl is perceived. Would you say that this is something the government should work on?
Of course, this is the work for the government to establish the facilities, to promote Ukraine and to put money in this sphere of promotion Ukraine in the world, of course. But we've got tourism, this little tour into Chernobyl zone. 1 day, 2 days, and you may stay there 1 week. It costs approximately $100 per day. It's not expensive to foreigners. Yes, right. But of course, we've got some highlights, and to develop the tourism and to attract foreign tourists. Among them, they are cheap prices, cheap food, cheap beer, for example. We may organize even beer tours into Ukraine, because beer costs 3-5 much cheaper than in European countries, in European cities. Cheap entertainments, nightclubs, cheap accommodation, hotels.
So creating these very specific tour packages is your idea?
Yes, right. I mean, yes, Ukraine is not as developed as European countries, but this is a plus. This is an advantage of this country, because like, let's take Cuba, for example. It's very interesting, because it's underdeveloped country. Ukraine is not underdeveloped, rather developed, but it's rather exotic for European tourists, or American tourists, or for from Asian countries, I mean. With our cities, big cities, yes, the capital, Kiev, Lviv, Odessa, they're very attractive. These are European cities with a unique architecture. As well, we have some religious, objects like Uman.
Yes.
There's a lot of Hasidim, or arriving in Ukraine.
Yearly, there's a very big celebration.
Yearly, and not
yearly.
only. They come here constantly, all the time. Maidan is rather attractive object as a point where the revolution occurred 4 years ago. We have some ski resorts, quite European one in Bukovel, you know.
Yes, yes.
With the nice slopes. The level is rather high, is a European one, but the price is 3 times
lower.
Right. We have also the biggest desert in Europe, Oleshkiv Sands, Oleshkivsky Piski,
Right.
and Askania Nova, natural reserve, national park. They're very vast and interesting with unique animals over there and plants.
Do you think this is a place that private entrepreneurs could step in and do more for attracting tourists?
Yes, maybe. But I think this the development of the tourism, the sphere of tourism, this is the job of our government. First of all, we have to put in money into this sphere to promote Ukraine, and and there's another problem: the bad infrastructure. You know,
Right.
bad roads in the regions.
Right.
We've got
It makes
nice
it very
roads here
difficult.
in the cities and some strategic roads, but in the majority of our regions, the roads are very poor. You know, this is one of the problems that hampers to.
It's development of tourism and
Yes,
also
right.
the infrastructure, the facilities. So you have these lovely areas, but are there places for tourists to stay near the sands or I know Bukovel is very well developed.
Yes,
but
well
what about
developed, and the hotels are rather nice. But and the road is not bad here. But unfortunately, this is only Bukovel.
Right.
But as the if we speak about the facilities, tourism facilities, they are vast in Ukraine. No, just you started with that phrase with our 2 seas, mountains,
Yes.
forests, etc. We got very pure rivers. You cannot go swimming, for example, in Great Britain, in Germany,
Right.
just to Rhine or to Danube swimming. No, it's impossible. They are dirty. But you may easily go swimming in Kyiv. The Dnieper River is pure. You've got beaches
Yes.
in the center of the city. You cannot find beaches in the center of the cities in Europe because the river are dirty.
Last year, the Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Grossman said that Ukraine has the potential to earn 10% of its GDP from tourism. So how realistic do you see this?
I think he knows the figures. As far as I know, that approximately 15 million people cross the border. I mean, foreigners which cross the Ukrainian border, 15 million. They are not, all of them, tourists, of course. Some of them are businessmen, relatives, etc. But we don't know the exact figure of tourists because sometimes people fill in private trip.
Right.
There's no need to write all the truth why they come here. But great deal of these people crossing the border, they are tourists. That may be millions.
And what areas of tourism are developing best now in Ukraine? So, for example, we know like Lviv is rated as one of the top 10 cities in several places as guides. And we know Lviv also has the top-rated jazz festival. So what are some other areas that you think Ukraine could develop for tourism?
I'd call 3 places, 3 cities. This is Lviv, this is Odessa, and Kyiv, of course. We have more cities which may be attractive. For example, Kharkiv, rather ancient and big city, nice, but not so developed for the tourists to perceive, to accept tourists, as well as Chernivtsi.
And what there could make Chernobyl a draw? What would, so we said for like Lviv, they have the coffee festival, jazz, these very small little niche festivals. What about Chernobyl would draw tourists? I've been there. It's a very beautiful place. One of my favorite places in Ukraine.
There is a lot of ancient buildings over there. This is the center of multinational culture. This is the city of culture, Ukrainian, Romanian, Moldavian, Jewish culture. That is maybe attractive.
And it's a very gorgeous city, the universities there,
yes,
the buildings, right. Yes. And where are some places in Ukraine that you see that that could be gems, places people would want to go but are undiscovered? So maybe some smaller places or places that you would recommend people seeing that they normally wouldn't know for Ukraine.
I think the way I mentioned, this is the desert, because nobody knows that the biggest, the largest desert in Europe is in Ukraine. This is Oleshkiv-Pisky. This is Kherson region. It's rather vast.
Absolutely.
You may go through it and you don't find any plants, any animals, but there are small ones. But all the same, this is the desert. It's very interesting.
Any other places you'd recommend?
I like the Carpathians. I mean some isolated places with the old Hutzul villages, with the pastures.
These hidden treasures that people ordinarily wouldn't come across. So these could be something for small tours or things like this as well. So Ukraine could sell itself for people who maybe wanted ecotourism to
yes,
visit.
This is one of the directions we should develop, ecotourism or green tourism. Yeah, and as far as I know, around Kyiv there's a lot of places which may be attractive as well for foreigners. And
also for day trips from Kyiv. So people could possibly stay in Kyiv or a major city and make short trips to places around the major cities as well.
No, as for me, I don't like big cities. I like rural life. So I'd recommend to stay 30, 40, 50 kilometers from Kyiv. There's a lot of good hotels and cottages, which we call eco or green tourism.
And let's talk briefly about this Ukrainian tourism magazine, Mandry.
Yes, right?
So who is your audience for the magazine?
Our audience are people who like to travel.
So Ukrainians
This is the traveling magazine, which is published in Ukrainian language. We've got a website as well, Mandry. I'm not going to advertise it, but we write about inner Ukrainian tourism, but destinations here in Ukraine, as well as about trips abroad, but exotic and countries.
Also about Ukraine as well as trips abroad. So aimed at a Ukrainian audience, but it also talks a bit as well about things that Ukrainians or Ukrainian speakers can see and do in Ukraine as well.
Yes, right. There's a lot of Ukrainians which don't know the attractions in Ukraine. For example, we have now we started to develop industrial tourism. There's a big city, Kyiv, maybe.
Yes.
And there is a lot of mines. The local authorities organize trips into those mines. The depth, 1 kilometers and 1,500 meters, sort of. These mines that extract iron raw. It is interesting, and they are functioning. You may get down there and to see how people work there, the conditions, to feel the atmosphere of industrial city.
So not just for tourists from abroad, but internal tourism also is a sphere that really needs to grow as well.
Of course. Most of tourists here in Ukraine, they are Ukrainian tourists, of course. We used to travel a lot, into Crimea, not anymore. But now we
We're developing some other beaches, some other areas that people can travel on their vacations.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Volodymyr.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions.
Today, we spoke with Volodymyr Ilchenko, editor-in-chief of Mandry Travel Magazine. Thank you for joining us.